Hello and welcome to another one of my thoughts videos. In this one I'd like to sort of round off the topic of a small planet theory. There's a lot more detail and things that I might touch on in the future, but that's the general gist of small planet theory, and it will tie into other topics. So I want to start diversifying from here, and from here it will lead into the next biggest scam that we are heading into. Now, the last video I did on where water came from as that gas around our small planet when the second sun went out, that caused that gas, the hydrogen and the oxygen, to combine into water and fall onto the planet as the planet grew. Now, in that last video, in the comments, Ian asked whether that means that the change of our planet and small planet theory growth and all that relates to the biblical chronology or the biblical timeline, which is actually relatively short, and I can answer that one by saying yes. We are actually on a planet that has a very much shorter history than people actually realize. As I've said in another video about time, we are extremely vague on our timeline of history. There are a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of misinterpretations and things, to the point where you can't really trust our historical record very much anyway. And techniques like carbon-14 dating and things like that that say that the planet is like so many millions of years old and all that sort of thing, there's certain truth and there's certain non-truths to that. And hopefully in the future videos I'll try and explain a little bit how that works. But the short answer is that the growth of our planet was actually, in my opinion and my research, indicates that it was very rapid and only no longer than 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. And you ask, how can that be? Everything is so stable. But in actual fact, it's not. Now that instability that the world has will be basically the source of the next great scam. Now the scam has been in preparation, and that is of global climate change. They've been working on it for a while and doing their tests to see how gullible we are, and they've had quite a bit of success. So after they get over this medical scam, they will ramp up the global change scam. Now the global change is that they are quite right in that the global climate is always changing. It always has. And as I said, we're starting with small planet. It grew, the planet grew, which was huge climatic changes, and we've had all sorts of climatic changes in recent times. It's recorded in the Bible that all of Africa was greener, if not greener than the Amazon over in South America, and who knows if South America was the opposite. But at some stage our climate changed to the degree that the Sahara Desert formed, and it's recorded who the people were in the Bible that populated those areas that God said, I'm going to wipe you out, and so he did, and now it's all a desert. And they've been finding all sorts of archaeological remains of cities, castles, all sorts of things, and evidence of very large river systems as big as the Amazonian river systems underneath the Sahara Desert sands. So climate change has always been around and always will be around, and they'll use that to scare everybody into all sorts of ridiculous and impossible sort of activities. One that is of interest to me right at the moment concerning small planet theory and our sun, our bisolar system, is that of the changing poles of not only our Earth but the Sun itself. Now normally our North Pole and South Pole wobble around the North and South a little bit fairly fairly restricted, but they are not stable. They wobble around seasonally and over the years as well. At the moment, it is actually moving a lot more than it usually does, which is causing a whole bunch of climate changes and things as well. And you say, where does that come from? Well, it was interesting. I had not known until Wuhan, basically, about that time, that our sun also has a north and a south pole, which is interesting in itself, and that every 11 years the north and south pole go through a transition and swap the poles. North becomes south and south becomes north. When that change happens, it's gradual. The poles lose weakness and then they start to move into the center. And when the poles are neither north nor south and has basically no north and south, that is when a lot of the sunspots, that's the greatest point of sunspot activity, because there's a conflict between where that orientation is, which produces a lot of disturbance in the magnetic fields of the sun, which then radiate out and cause all sorts of problems for us in our electronics and in our radio communications about every 5th year. Then it slowly goes for another 5 to 6 years, and every 11 years it does a swap, and then the north becomes south, south becomes north. Now, interestingly, they give it a name of the great disturbance, or the great something or other, and then the great minimum, or whatever, there's minimum activity. We reached a minimum activity in December and January of 2019-2020, which coincided with the medical scam that we have experienced as World War III, basically. That's very interesting to me, and I'm trying to work out what the relationship is between that extreme of the swap of the poles. We can expect in the next 5 years, 5 to 6 years, we're going to get a lot of sunspot activity, a lot of electronic disturbances, things with a great number of sunspot activity. They have scientists who are counting sunspots every day to see how many sunspots there are and get a pattern. So over the last 50 or 60 years or so, they've realized that the poles of the sun swap regularly every 11 years. Now, that 11-year swap causes huge repercussions in our magnetic fields and our climate. So the big scam is that we're going to have lots of climate change, which is true, but they're going to blame it all on humanity when the biggest culprit is the sun. When the sun does its flips and wobbles and bits and pieces, it causes great climatic change on the planet. And we don't know how fast they're going to be and how frequent, because we haven't been monitoring them for enough number of centuries. But we know that the Amazon, or at least Africa, the Sahara Desert, was green and now it's not. And now it's starting to show signs of reverting back to green as they start to plant, and the climate change is helping to do that. The whole thing of carbon dioxide emissions is absolute stupidity. Plants need carbon dioxide to live, and they, in doing so, provide us with oxygen. They also fix the carbon into the fossil fuels that we can then burn, and it's all a cycle which is self-righting. They're going to throw a whole heap of stuff at us, so be careful. In the future, the big scam to come is climate change. But be warned, the climate has been changing, always does, every year, drastically, rapidly, and we have been experiencing this as a species for a very short and unstable time. So it would or should be no surprise to anybody that it will happen, but they'll use it to great effect to freak everybody else out and get us to do ridiculous things just like they have been doing over the last couple of years. So that's more or less the end of the major block of small planet theory, although there's lots to come. The next is global climate change. And there's lots of interesting scientific detail connected with that, which will be misconstrued, or you can figure it out.